All right, listeners, our sponsor is one of our favorite companies, Vanta, and we have something very new from them to share. Of course, you know Vanta enables companies to generate more revenue by getting their compliance certifications. That's SOC 2, ISO 27001. But the thing that we want to share now is Vanta has grown to become the best security compliance platform as you hit hypergrowth and scale into a larger enterprise.
It's kind of wild. When we first started working with Vanta and met Christina, my gosh, they had like a couple hundred customers, maybe. Now they've got 5,000, some of the largest companies out there. It's awesome.
Yeah, and they offer a tremendous amount of customization now for more complex security needs. So if you're a larger company and in the past you showed Vanta to your compliance department, you might have heard something like, oh, well, we've already got a compliance process in place and we can't integrate this new thing. But now, even if you already have a SOC 2, Vanta makes maintaining your compliance even more efficient and robust.
They launched Vendor Risk Management. This allows your company to quickly understand the security posture of the vendors that you're choosing in a standardized way that cuts down on security review times. This is great. And then on the customization front, they now also enable custom frameworks built around your controls and policies. Of course, that's in addition to the fact that with Vanta, you don't just become compliant once, you stay compliant with real-time data pulled from all of your systems, now all of your partner systems, and you get a trust report page to prove it to your customers. If you click the link in the show notes here or go to vanta.com/acquired, you can get a free trial. And if you decide you love it, you will also get $1,000 off when you become a paying customer. Make sure you go to vanta.com/acquired.
Hey guys, it's Ben. The audio in today's show is a little degraded since we recorded from Skype, but we're super pumped about the show nonetheless. Bear with us and we'll get the kinks worked out for future shows.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Who got the truth now? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Sit me down, say it straight. Another story on the way. Who got the truth?
Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of Acquired, the podcast where we talk about startup acquisitions that actually went well. I'm Ben Gilbert.
I'm David Rosenthal.
And we're here today to talk about the Bungie acquisition by Microsoft.
And most importantly, we have a very special surprise for everyone. This is our first episode with a special guest, and we have a really incredible one for you guys. Joining us today is Ed Fries, who was at Microsoft during the acquisition and actually was the person at Microsoft whose group led the acquisition of Bungie. So we're very honored to have Ed with us today. He was at Microsoft from 1986 to 2004, led the acquisition of Bungie, and among many others. And today he's a prolific angel investor and startup advisor and board member in the game space and others in technology, which is how we got to know him. And we're totally honored to have Ed with us today.
Thanks. I didn't realize I was your first guest. That's exciting.
Yeah, we try to keep that part secret.
Now everybody knows.
You guys are old pros. I know. It's good.
David, you want to do the acquisition history and facts?
Yeah. So most people are probably familiar with Bungie, the creators of the video game franchise Halo. The company was founded in the early 90s by two undergrads at the University of Chicago, Alex Seropian and Jason Jones. And they made a few games, mostly for Mac, actually, during the 90s, including hits such as Minotaur, The Labyrinths of Crete, and others. And then they had their first breakout success with a game called Marathon at the end of 1994, and then had a couple of successful sequels and other projects that came out of that. Ben, you have a fun personal history with.
Yep. Yeah, actually, my dad was a reviewer for the Mac Users of Delaware of Marathon, kind of in the real early days before it came out, and then as the trilogy unfolded. And he sent me some pictures last night. We actually have the collector's edition box set of the Marathon trilogy for Mac.
Pretty cool, and so that was Bungie for most of the 90s, and then in the late 90s. In 1999, they unveiled to great fanfare their next project after Marathon, which was a game that they were calling Halo. They actually unveiled it at a Macworld keynote in the summer of '99, and it was introduced by Steve Jobs himself. And they continued working on it for another year, and then in the summer of 2000, there was a twist. And Ed steps in, and and Microsoft in June of 2000 announced that they were acquiring Bungie and Halo, and that Halo would become an exclusive launch title for the forthcoming Xbox console, which was going to launch the next year. And everything changed at that moment. So, Ed, thanks again for joining us. Take us back to, it was 15 years ago now. How did it all happen? How did it come together?
Well, first, I was also a Bungie game player even before I started running Microsoft's game business. I played a couple games in their Myth series, which was their real-time strategy series. And so I was a big fan of these guys. I knew that they did really good work. We got final approval to make the Xbox at a meeting we called it Valentine's Day Massacre that happened in February 2000. And so starting then, my life was really crazy because I knew that I needed a portfolio of games ready for launch in November 2001, which was less than 2 years away. Normally games take...
And no developers even knew about the Xbox at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was just an idea before then. And so I was desperate for content. And what happened was, one day my phone rang, and it was a guy named Peter Tamte who did biz dev for Bungie, who I'd gotten to know over the previous few years. And he told me that Bungie was in bad financial trouble. They were running out of money, and they were likely going to be acquired, if nothing else happened, that they were going to be acquired by Take-Two. Take-Two already owned a third of Bungie from an earlier transaction. And he wanted to see if I was interested. By the way, there's some debate about this point because also John Kimmick was also involved. So there's a guy named one of our product planners, John Kimmick. His job was to go out and talk to lots of game companies, and so he was also talking to them at the same time. So I don't know if I talked to him first or John talked to him first, but it doesn't matter. Peter called me, told me this stuff, and I said, yeah, I'm very interested. I mean, I really respect your work, and I'd love to hear what you guys are up to. That was the start of it.
Wow. And, I mean, I got to imagine there were other, maybe 15 or 20 or so launch titles for the Xbox when it came out. So, you guys, did do partnerships and with other game developers out there. Was there something special about Bungie or Halo in particular, or just that you knew these guys were talented and the conversation started and went from there? Did you have other high-profile targets that you were looking at?
At that time, if any talented developer walked through my door, I was going to try to do a deal with them. Because I had a big pile of money. That wasn't my problem. I had less than 2 years, and I needed to try to get this portfolio done. And so that I was definitely happy to talk to them and try to put something together.
Did you try to do any other acquisitions at this time? Were you thinking about doing like an all first party launch if you could get it with the pile of money?
No, we were always going to do a mix of first and third party. We knew we needed that, and at launch it was about half and half. We had signed a deal with Lorne Lanning and his group Oddworld Inhabitants. That was probably the first big deal we did. And that was kind of a big deal because we pulled them away from Sony, who had published their previous game. So, in fact, there's a funny Penny Arcade comic from the time where Lorne Lanning's talking about how great it is to work with Microsoft and how he's really, really wants to work with us. And then in the last panel, he says, plus they gave me this hat made of money. He's wearing this. Anyway.
What were some of the kind of selling points for bringing those guys in-house? I mean, you've got a lot of different tools at your disposal for coming and joining and working directly with and for the company that's developing the platform. What were your hooks for that?
So, we had done multiple acquisitions before we started the Xbox when I was running the PC business. Probably the biggest one is a company called FASA that did Mech Warrior and Shatter, all those. But we never went out with a goal of acquiring a company. Our goal was to find the best game developers in the world and support them with whatever way was best for them. Okay. I mean,
whether it was publishing or acquisition or
exactly. And so in this case, the developer was calling and saying, "We're running out of money." Bungie at that time was a developer/publisher. They did both, and it was more common then. But pretty much all the little developer publishers were going out of business because doing distribution back then was becoming harder and harder for a little company to do. I mean, to try to knock on the door of a Walmart and that kind of thing.
Probably especially as the world was shifting to console, right?
Yeah, exactly. So in their case, they were both a developer and a publisher, and we're finding that just wasn't going to work out anymore. And so that's what started the conversation. Then I got a chance to see Halo, basically to see that trailer that they showed at Macworld, and knew that this is something I really hoped I could get for us, as part of our lineup.
Did you or anybody else at Microsoft have any qualms about acquiring a company that was mostly a Mac developer at that point, or was it just all about the content?
No, I didn't care about the Mac thing at all, honestly. I mean, they had done Myth versions of their games, or I'm sorry, they did PC versions of their games, like PC versions of Myth, for example. So I knew that they could do PC versions, and the Xbox, especially in the early days, the Xbox was thought of basically as a PC disguised as a console. So I wasn't worried about them having the technical ability to do it.
They were always working on Halo for Mac before. Did you have to tear it all down and re-architect it for PC and then do a PC port to Mac later? Or how much of Halo was already done when you had acquired it?
None, basically.
Which is funny because if you watch the Macworld trailer, I think it was Jason who presented it on stage. He makes a big deal about this is all running native on Mac and being rendered real time.
Yeah, and it's got these wild animals running around and stuff.
Yeah, and what I loved is they don't actually show Master Chief or anyone else killing any Covenant, because I guess probably I could imagine Apple didn't want any deaths on stage at Mac.
Yeah, well, I mean, so we can talk about the development of it. Let me talk a little more about the deal first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So
great.
the thing was, I wanted Halo, right? And I wanted the development team that was working on Halo. I basically wanted all the developers in the company. And so but Take-Two already owned part of the company. So I had to call up the head of Take-Two, which is a guy named Ryan Brandt, and we kind of had to work out between the two of us how to split the company into two pieces. And so Bungie was developing two titles at that time. They were
right, Oni, right?
Yeah, Oni was the other game. Very good. So Bungie had two teams, one in Chicago and one down in California. And the California team was doing Oni, and the Chicago team was doing Halo. And so basically the deal I struck with Ryan was that he would get ownership of all the back catalog. So all the intellectual property for all the Bungie titles that had been published so far. Plus we would finish Oni for them and ship Oni. And then the Oni developers, once it was done, would move to Redmond and become part of our team. And the Chicago guys would come as well. So basically all I got was the Halo IP, plus all the developers, and he got Oni and the back catalog, and then between the two of us, we acquired the company basically. And some people think I got the better part of that deal. I don't know.
Honestly, at the time though, you make the best decisions that you feel like are aligned with each of your incentives, and you do the most with what you walked away with.
Yeah, and Ryan was great to work with, and he and I did deals after that. I don't think there were any hard feelings among any of the parties involved in the deal. So
cool. one thing that I just totally lit up when I was reading about this last night. You got a couple of pretty interesting phone calls after the deal was announced.
Yeah, well, when I did the deal, I didn't even think about it, but apparently Jobs was not happy. Steve Jobs was not happy, and so I don't know. A few weeks later, once the deal was announced, I got mail from Steve Ballmer, or got a call from Ballmer or something, and it just said, Steve Jobs is mad about that you acquired Bungie. Call him and try to calm him down, or something like that. And I'm like, it had this phone number. And I'm like, that's Steve Jobs' phone number.
It sounds like here's a noose, go hang yourself.
I'm like, okay, I can do this. So I dialed the number.
How long did it take you to work up the nerve to dial those?
Not very
those
long,
numbers?
but I had an idea, which was good, which I'll explain in a minute. So I didn't just call with no idea. I called with an idea. And here's the thing. The irony of the whole thing was, the whole deal started when Peter Tamte, the biz dev guy from Bungie, called me. But when we acquired the company, we had room for everybody but him. We didn't have a job for him. And so I felt really bad that he was like the one guy out of the acquisition who ended up without a job. But he had told me that he wanted to start a Mac porting company. And anyway, so that was in my head when I got this mail that, I'm supposed to call Jobs, I kind of put two and two together. And so I call Steve and I say, hey, sorry, I'm the guy who bought Bungie. But we want to do a Mac version of Halo. And, actually I want to do a lot of other Mac, games. I don't have anything against the Mac. I worked on Mac Excel. I worked on Mac Word. We have, Age of Empires and all this other intellectual property, from our PC gaming business. And we would love to bring that to the Mac as well. And I know just the guy to do it. There's this guy, Peter Tamte, ex-Bungie guy. He wants to start a company to take a bunch of PC games to the Macintosh. And Steve Jobs was really friendly on the phone. He said, that sounds great. Here, let me give you a guy on my team. And he assigned me to somebody on his team to work out the deal. And it was a very short conversation and a friendly one. So it was good. So all of a sudden I had this deal for Peter Tamte. Apple agreed to fund the creation of his new company, which was really cool. So he had someone to fund his new company, and we were going to get to port a bunch of our games to the Mac. Maybe we'd make some money on that. So it felt like a real win. There was just one requirement from Apple, and that was that Alex Seropian and I show up to the next Macworld and be on stage with Steve Jobs to announce this new partnership. So I was a little nervous about being a Microsoft guy going on stage in front of like 10,000 Mac people.
Well, Bill Gates had done it before, so
in very dramatic fashion.
So, but I'm like, if that's what it takes to get the deal done, sure, I'll do it. So we agree, and a few months go by, and then it's time for Macworld, and so Alex and I get on a plane and we fly to New York, and driving in from the airport in a cab, and I remember the phone rings because we're going in. We had just landed, and we were supposed to rehearse that afternoon, and then the event was the next morning. And phone rings, and it's one of Steve Jobs' handlers, and they say, rehearsal's really not going well. Steve's really upset with how everything is. We really don't want you guys to come in. We'll go and check into your hotel, and we'll call you after dinner. I'm like, okay. So Alex and I go, we check in, we're waiting. The phone rings, maybe 7:00 at night, and they say, it's still really going badly. Jobs is really mad. Why don't you guys just come in the morning? And I'm like, well, the event is in the morning. And they say, yeah, just show up, and we'll just brief you right before you go on stage. I'm like, okay. Okay, so we get no rehearsal. We're going to go stand in
Wow.
front of 10,000 people and we're going to say something for a minute or so. It's okay. So we show up the next morning and just before it starts, Steve Jobs comes over, shakes our hand, says, "Hey, I'm going to say this at some point during my talk. And then you guys just walk on stage, do your thing, talk for 30 seconds, talk for a minute, and then I'll shake your hands and then you're off the stage again." Like, okay, we got this. So that's what we did.
So you guys basically got to wing it on stage.
We totally
at
winged it.
Macworld.
I haven't seen the video, so I wonder how bad it was. But I tell you, I mean, so those were my only encounters ever in my life with Steve Jobs. So I mean, it was always he was always very friendly to me. Both times I talked to him on the phone or in person, and he did an amazing job. I mean, sitting in the front row of the Macworld, watching him, just take the audience and just hold their attention, was incredible to see. It was really fun to be part of.
Which is a good it's a good segue. I mean, at that moment, it sort of feels like everybody, Steve Jobs is happy, Mac users are happy, Halo's still coming to the Mac, Take-Two gets Oni, you get a great launch title for the Xbox coming out the next year, and then Halo launches, and we should we'll dive into so many questions about that, but for the probably 2 or 3 of our listeners out there who don't know what happened next, Halo goes on to the first Halo has I believe a 50% attach rate to all Xboxes sold within the first year of launch. Sells 1 million units in 6 months, 6.5 million units over the lifetime of Halo, which would be estimated. There are no hard numbers out there, but kind of $200 to $300 million in revenue just from the first Halo. But then it goes on and becomes this huge cultural phenomenon and a franchise. I remember in 2004 when Halo 2 launched, I was a freshman in college, and like people were organizing trips to the local GameStop to go buy Halo 2 at midnight. It was incredible.
Yeah. I think I was up for 24 hours. I mean, just the sheer amount of Mountain Dew and Cheetos.
And so Halo 2 ends up, when it launches in 2004, doing $125 million in sales on the first day, and becomes the fastest selling media product in U.S. history. Bigger than any movie, any album. Really, it was an incredible moment for video games and technology in general. And then the kind of the rest of, I would say the rest of the story is history. Would love to bring Ed back in, and the Bungie story takes a few interesting turns along the way. But first, Ed, I mean, when you were desperate, you needed content for the launch. Could you ever? You knew Halo was good, but did you think it was going to be like this?
I hoped it would be. I mean, I have to tell you that I wish the ride on the inside was as smooth as the one you paint on the outside.
It was a straight line, right?
I mean, the Bungie guys were always incredible to work with, super talented. It was clear from as soon as we got them in that this was an amazing group of people. But a little quirky too. I mean, like Microsoft, just quirky from a Microsoft point of view. Like Microsoft, everybody has, private offices with a door that can shut. And that's like the selling point of going to Microsoft, or at least it was back in the day. You got your own private office. And so I proudly toured the Bungie guys around this new wing that we had just built out for them in one of the buildings. And it was all, brand new private offices from one end to the other. And they looked at me and they said, "We hate this." I said, "What do you mean?" They're like, "We want all these walls torn out, and we just want a big open bay." And I'm like with cubicles, like that was like the lowest status thing you could have at Microsoft, and they're like, yeah, we want cubicles with really low walls. And I'm like, oh, you're kidding me. I wish I knew this a few months ago. So the facilities literally had to tear the walls out of this place.
So the acquisition price, never before disclosed of Bungie was whatever you paid for Bungie plus all the 2 remodels you did to buildings in
I mean, the
Redmond.
great thing about, working at a big company like Microsoft when it came to acquisitions, the corp dev people were so incredible. The HR people were so incredible. Somebody like me who ran a business could just basically say, make this happen, and it would happen, and they would deal with so many details and so many difficult things, and facilities people as well. It's like, make these walls go away, and the walls would go away like magic. But, so that was one thing. So we tore out all the walls and gave them the space that they wanted. But every Microsoft team has a test team that supports them. And it's a really important part of Microsoft culture. And they didn't want test team. They're like, we don't need test team. And I'm like, yeah, you do. You really need a group of testers. This is the way we build software at Microsoft.
Did all the engineers just test their own code, or they trade testing responsibility around, or how did they
it's
work?
pretty typical in the game business, especially back then. It's like they thought of testers as a bunch of high school kids, but not professional testers like we had at Microsoft. And so, the other thing the Bungie guys wanted was they wanted secure access to their area. They wanted the only Bungie people, and I suppose me and a few other people could get into their area. So they had these doors that, that were needed card key access to get into. And so anyway, they didn't want the test team. I'm like, fine, I'm going to give you a test team, and I'm going to park them right outside your secure doors. Okay. So they're going to sit right outside your doors. And what happened was that test team was run by a guy named Harold Ryan. And the test team really proved themselves to Bungie over the period of that first Halo. They showed them what a group of professional testers can really do. And like an example is they built a giant render farm out of a big pile of Xboxes, and the render farm brought the time to make a new build of Halo down from, 8 hours to a half an hour or something like that. So the next, between Halo 1 and Halo 2, they moved that secure wall to the other side of the testers, so that now the testers were part of the family. So
how's that for tangible success?
And you still, even with the addition of testers, though, I mean, one of the things that I think is so incredible about Bungie is later on in Bungie's history, in 2007, it ends up getting respun out from Microsoft, and when that happened, there were only 120 people working there, I think, including the testers.
Yeah. Do you know who the president of Bungie is right now? Harold Ryan.
Oh, no.
Oh, really?
How about that?
That's awesome. Embracing testing.
So anyway, so that's a story for you. When we first started showing Halo around to the game press, there was a lot of skepticism. They were wary about Microsoft entering the console business to begin with. They thought we really didn't understand console games, which was true. And then we're really excited to show them a first-person shooter, which is a PC genre, looks like a PC game. And they're like, this isn't Mario, this isn't Sonic, this is just proof you guys don't get it. So we got a lot of pushback from the press, actually. E3 2001, we only had half-speed graphics cards in the machines that we had at that time, and so it didn't show that well on the show floor. There was more kind of rumbling in the press. There's Penny Arcade comics from that time where the Penny Arcade guys are really down on the game. I don't know if I can swear on your podcast, but one of them just says Halo is shit. And so coming into launch, it was very unclear whether Halo was going to be our hit title. I mean, we were all playing it, after hours and saying, is this game as good as we think it is? Because this seems amazing. But we're kind of all PC gamers, and we're going, well, maybe we're drinking our own Kool-Aid here. Maybe console gamers won't want this kind of a game.
Did you have to, in preparing for the launch, establish what was going to be your flagship game for varying marketing channels and the way that you're talking about the platform and what you're showing off, or did that sort of organically fall out after you released it?
No, absolutely, we did. We, because we had a certain marketing budget, and probably the biggest thing we had to decide was which titles were going to get TV. And the TV budgets, we could afford to do TV for just a couple titles. And so Oddworld and Halo ended up getting basically equal treatment at launch with big TV campaigns from us. And Oddworld was kind of this is a developer's known to console world. I should say the game was called Munch's Odyssey. Oddworld's a company, but so that and then Halo, and that's kind of the way we're sort of not sure, which of these games is gonna do best for us.
Yeah, still not sure. in sort of that like early launch stage like that, how do you know and how fast do you know which of those two is going to be?
Well, once things start to sell and, reviewers get their hands on it, it becomes clear really quickly. But especially back in those days, there were a lot of things that had a lot of lag when it came to marketing. So, anything that was in print, for example, it was maybe a 3-month delay. If you wanted to be in mailers, or not mailers, but say like a Christmas catalog that gets inserted and insert into newspapers and stuff like that, magazines. It was all like 3 months or 4 months. So we always had to commit to the marketing team 3 or 4 months in advance when a game was going to ship. And then if we weren't there, if one of these circulars ran but the product wasn't available in store, we could get fined, right? So that was always that was always built into our development process. But it's not like today where information just goes boom out there right away and you can make changes right away. There was actually stuff printed with ink, that sat in warehouses.
Yeah. Hard to imagine. What, I'm curious, I really want to ask, especially because the whole theme of our show is thinking about technology, and while there's certainly a huge element of, both Bungie and Halo, and our very first episode we did Pixar, of just content and creativity, there also is a huge element of technology in Halo and Bungie and new technology. And I'm curious from your guys' perspective, to me, the story that I write in my head is, the single player experience of Halo is good. It's, great. I'd buy the game, I'd play it, but what made Halo was multiplayer and networked multiplayer.
Yeah, I remember buying a router specific. Actually, no, I didn't buy the router because I went through my dad's old bin and got one. But doing a router and stringing 4 Xboxes together in my friend's basement.
Yeah.
4 Xbox Live. So the only way to do that
I think every high school kid in America did that at the time.
That's exactly right. I mean, it was one of the only games that you could do that, because Xbox Live didn't come out for a year later, right? And and so people came up with all kinds of. I remember you could hook your Xbox to a PC, and then people would do these PC connections over the internet.
Software on your PC.
But it was all handmade and.
How much did you guys both think about that beforehand in terms of this incredible experience of playing with your friends, but then B, how much did that shape the eventual launch of Xbox Live and Halo 2, being to my mind, that first real AAA style, fully realized experience of what playing with other people and your friends anytime you wanted could be?
Yeah, so a few things. It's amazing how much that team accomplished in less than 2 years. I mean, that is not very much time in the game business. And not only did they have the single player, but they had multiplayer, but they also had split screen multiplayer. They had network multiplayer. They also had split screen co-op play, which you don't even have split screen co-op play in Halo 5. It just ships,
Yeah, controversially.
So, it was amazing what was in that first game. But yeah, after they shipped Halo 1, then working with the Xbox Live team, helping them develop Halo, helping them develop Xbox Live and develop how games would work on Xbox Live. That was a big thing for the Halo team. They worked really closely with Xbox Live. Tons of Halo fans on the Xbox Live side, so they really wanted to work with the Bungie guys. It was a very mutual respect experience there. The problem is Halo wasn't due for, a few more years. Halo 2 wasn't due for a few more years. And I can talk a little about that and what happened there. So somebody reminded me the other day that actually the first Xbox Live title that we launched with our first party group was actually out of that FASA team that I mentioned earlier. And it was a Mech Commander, was the first one. But anyway, meanwhile, the Bungie guys are go off after shipping Halo 1 and a couple things happen. Jason Jones, who's, just the creative genius behind everything Bungie, decides he's going to leave the Halo team and start a new project. And so he and a small group go off on the side and they start to work on this new project. Meanwhile, the Halo guys, the main Halo team, starts working on Halo 2. And they get a couple of years into it, and it's kind of going off the rails without Jason running it. So Jason comes back and he looks at it, and this is about a year before it was supposed to ship, and he's very unhappy with it. And the team has a lot of problems. They tried to do too many things technically. They tried to do this new lighting model that really didn't work. I mean, I love, you guys tell this story like it's so nice and smooth, and Halo 1 came out and Halo 2. For me, it was like this nightmare. It's like Halo 2, it's all screwed up, And then Jason comes back and he's like, I can fix this. And he goes through and just like, redoes a whole big part of Halo 2. But in order to do it, he needs a whole nother year. So it's going to, instead of being out in 2003, it's going to be out in 2004. And, so I have to go to Robbie, my boss, and tell him he's not going to have Halo 2 till 2004 and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it's not my favorite memories, but I'm glad you liked the game when it came out. So yeah, anyway, that was, Jason got it back on track, and they were able to bring out a game that was really special.
It's so so interesting. David and I were talking before this about a parallel to a previous episode. Actually, our first one is Disney acquiring Pixar, and in so many parallels, because it's a creative hits-based business where you're doing the creative studio work in-house and putting this thing out and hoping it really resonates with people. And one of the things that makes that process work is the ability to have that honest conversation internally and the mechanisms by which you fix things when you're off the rails. And there's this incredible parallel here to, the story of Toy Story as it was being developed, where that went totally off the rails.
Toy Story 2.
No, Toy Story 1, the original.
Uh-huh.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think I've read this too, yeah.
Where Woody was mean.
Yeah.
And they were screening the as far as they had gotten, and it wasn't fully rendered and fully realized, but the story, they had to change the story and rip apart a bunch of storyboards and I think delay a year, because it was just like you were watching the movie and it didn't feel nice and it didn't feel right, and it wasn't the experience they were trying to create.
And they were getting a bunch of feedback, I think, from Katzenberg or something, and it was, all screwed up. I know, you don't really want to see how this stuff is made on the inside. It's just like, this game is awesome.
It's all magic and wonder.
Same thing in regular startups too.
Exactly.
What I don't want to dwell on this for too long, because it's not a super core part of the story, and you had left Microsoft by this point, but obviously Halo 2, despite the sausage making being a nightmare for you, goes on to become the most successful, I think, video game of all time at that point when it was launched, and then Halo 3 even eclipsed that and helped launch the Xbox 360. But then after Halo 3, Bungie spins out of Microsoft, and you were gone, so you may not know, but to the extent you do, how and why did that happen? Microsoft ended up retaining a stake in Bungie, but and Bungie kept working on Halo through Reach and ODST. But how did that happen?
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you what I understand about the story, and everything up till now I've talked about stuff I was directly involved with. Now it's more like things I've heard. So I apologize in advance to anyone if I get something not quite right here. But after Halo 2 shipped, there was a disagreement about royalties. There was some kind of royalty agreement between the person who followed me and the guys at Bungie. And after Halo 2 shipped, the Bungie guys felt like that deal was not followed the way they thought it should be. And they decided they would be better off separate, as a separate company again, than part of Microsoft. And they went into negotiations with Microsoft to figure out how they could split out and do that. And my understanding is Microsoft agreed to let them go out and become an independent company under the conditions that they do a certain number of titles. And once those titles were made for Microsoft, they were free to go, basically. And so they entered into an agreement to do that. And I think those titles were Halo 3, Halo ODST, and Halo Reach. And so after they finished Halo Reach, they went on to do their new game, Destiny.
Destiny.
This is a great time to tell you about one of our very favorite companies, Crusoe.
So Crusoe, as listeners know by now, is a clean compute cloud provider specifically built for AI workloads. NVIDIA is one of their major partners, and literally Crusoe's data centers are nothing but racks and racks of A100s and H100s. And because Crusoe's cloud is purpose-built for AI and run on wasted, stranded, or clean energy, they can provide significantly better performance per dollar than traditional cloud providers.
Yes, we talked about that on our ACQ2 episode with Crusoe CEO Chase Lockmiller.
The other element that makes Crusoe special is the environmental angle. Crusoe, of course, locates their data centers at stranded energy sites. So think oil flares, wind farms that can't use all the energy they generate, etc., and uses that power that would otherwise be wasted to run your AI workloads instead.
Yep. Obviously, it's a huge benefit for the environment and for customers on costs, since Crusoe doesn't rely on the energy grid. Energy is the second largest cost of running AI after, of course, the price you pay NVIDIA for the chips. And these lower energy costs get passed on to customers.
It's super cool that they can put their data centers out there in these remote locations where, quote unquote, energy happens, as opposed to the other hyperscalers such as AWS and Google and Azure, who need to build their data centers close to major traffic hubs where the internet happens because they are doing everything in their clouds.
Yep. If you, your company, or your portfolio companies would like to use the lower cost and more performant infrastructure for your AI workloads, go to crusoecloud.com/acquired. That's CRUSOE cloud.com/acquired, or click the link in the show notes.
So Ed, one of the things that we like to talk about a lot are trying to figure out and pattern match the things from an acquisition that made it successful, that made that experience where, you know, the value of the small company plus whatever it was that the big company brought to the deal, the combination of those things is a gigantic multiple of the two parts, and they're separate. It's kind of a 1 + 1 = 3 thing.
Yeah.
What characteristics, and what actions and what things transpired that made this so successful?
Well, I think, most game developers pretty much feel the same, which is like, I just want to make an incredible game. I want to have the resources to make the game that I have in my head, and then I want to see it have an honest chance to reach its market, right? To reach as many people as possible. So, if you think about trying to do that as a little struggling independent company like Bungie was versus trying to do it under the umbrella of Microsoft that's about to launch a brand new console and has a $300 million marketing budget and it's going to, make a lot of noise about this new platform. I mean, that's a big opportunity for someone to have their ideas and their creativity right along with that big push. So that's I think what's in it for a game developer to want to team up and be part of this bigger thing. I think the challenge along the way is, and this is something we always, I worried a lot about and we worked hard on is one of the things that makes these teams special is they have their own unique culture. Like, that's what you should hear when I'm saying Bungie wanted to rip out the walls, because they worked super collaboratively as a team. They wanted the programmers and the artists and to be able to just shout to each other across this room, and by the way, if you go to visit Bungie's office now, it's in this giant, what used to be a movie theater, and it's a giant bay. It's still completely open because that's part of their culture. So how do you integrate something creative into a bigger company like a Microsoft and still protect it so that it can have its own unique culture? I think that's really the challenge of management that's running something like that.
Yeah, and there's obviously a tension you have to manage there between efficiencies of the larger business and respecting the culture of the smaller. Did you struggle at all with the decision to move them to Redmond?
I didn't, but in retrospect, I probably wouldn't have done it later. We went through multiple other acquisitions over time, and I think the more you can do to preserve the culture of the company, the better, because I think that's really what makes them unique, and that uniqueness, at least in the entertainment world, is really important. It expresses itself in the product itself. So, I like to talk about how, I had these two really great teams who worked for me. One was called Ensemble Studios, and they did the Age of Empires series down in Texas. And another, the Bungie team. And if you looked at the cultures of those two companies, they were almost diametrically opposed. Like if you wrote their values down, there would be like opposite lists, like Bungie would be like, we're hardcore, and Ensemble would be, we're a family, I don't know, stuff like that. It would just be really different. And that kind of taught me that it's not, that there isn't like a culture that works, it's like having a culture is what matters. It's not which culture you have that matters, having a strong culture that attracts specific people that fit within that culture and really enforcing it and really making it, that culture ends up just expressing itself in the product. I don't know how else to say it. So
yeah, it's so cool to hear you say that, because that's such been a core theme of our whole show, and part of the reason we decided to do this.
Good. I haven't heard any of the other episodes, so
yeah. Well, we talked about Pixar. We've done Instagram, and we've done Twitch, and all of those were companies that when they were acquired had a very, very strong culture that's so far, at least with all of them, been allowed to remain independent, and they've all thrived hugely. And for us, I think a big takeaway has been the importance of doing that. When you have a great culture, that's when great things get created.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things was we were able to bring those two Bungie teams together, though. The Chicago team and the California team together in one spot. And we needed that, I think, to get the Halo work done. So maybe in that case it was the right thing to do. But in general, it's not always the right thing to do. And then the challenge you have in a bigger organization is how do you integrate with the other parts of the company that need to work with you? I had gone through a process of integrating marketing into my game teams when I was doing PC gaming business. And even though the marketing guys didn't technically report to me, they were integrated and sitting with my teams all through the organization. And then after Xbox came along, there was all of a sudden this kind of bigger Xbox organization, and the head of the Xbox marketing wanted to have all his marketing people under him sitting in his building. So they all got pulled out, and I think it was a really bad decision because, they really got separated from the teams, and all of a sudden it was sort of an us and them kind of thing rather than that we're all working together. We do different functions, but we're all trying to do the same thing. I mean, an example of that would be the first TV ads came back from the agency for Halo, and we showed them to the Bungie guys, and they hated them. They really, really hated them. There's a guy running around with a gun and he's shooting stuff, and they're, and you might think, oh, that's what Halo's about. To the Bungie guys, that is not what Halo is about at all. For them, Halo is like the quiet before the storm. It's that epic long vista that you see and realize you're going to be heading there later. It's
the original theme music.
Yeah, it's the music. It's all that. So we had to way back and try to fix this, TV commercial. But that's the kind of stuff that happened when there isn't this integrated team working together all the way through so that they really understand the vision for the product.
Yeah, it's so interesting thinking about just from my time at Microsoft when we kind of had the one Microsoft reorg and went functional from divisional, and where's the appropriate place in the hierarchy to separate into divisions versus functions. So with functions being, you have all the marketing people together for all the business groups and all the tech people together for all the business groups versus, having these sort of family units of these separate divisions where everyone's totally integrated.
Right.
And it sounds like, at least in this kind of creative endeavor space, the divisional kind of works better and all the different functions need to be super tightly integrated with each other.
I was at Microsoft 18 years. So I don't know how many times I saw that that reorg happen back one way and then back the other and back one way and back the other, It's like the grass is always greener, it's like one way has a certain set of problems and the other way has a different set of problems. And so it seems like they just toggle back and forth between the two. I don't really understand it. But.
Well, one of the things we do on our show that we really enjoy doing is 3 segments in particular that we can run through quickly. And Ed, we'd love you to participate too. The first is that Ben and I each assign a category to the acquisition, and the kind of 5 we've identified, we could find more that break out of the box, but the 5 we've identified are people, technology, product, business line, or I guess 4. The 5th is other wild card. But yeah, for me, it's interesting. I have really pegged Halo and Bungie as a product acquisition for Microsoft. But it's interesting, hearing you talk, Ed, it's really, I think you've given a lot of data to support people as well. Ultimately, I think I'm going to stick with product simply because more than anything, because of the spin out that ended up happening later on and Bungie going on to leave Microsoft and that DNA to leave Microsoft and Halo sticking behind as a product for Xbox. What would you say, Ben?
I'm not going to disagree. I think it's absolutely that. Like you said, there's definitely a learning from the folks at Bungie about their culture and about how to produce that sort of game and bring it to a platform that nobody thought was going to have a first-person shooter like the PC and things like that. But yeah, I think my vote would be product. Ed, what do you think?
I'm sticking with the people for sure. It's one thing to create a franchise, and it's another to continue it. Is one thing I'd say. And these are the people that created Halo. Out of nothing, and so it's true. There's a different team that's moving Halo forward now, and they've added a lot of interesting new things to the franchise. But Bungie created it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they created Destiny, which I also think is very good. So I don't know. I just always fall on the side of the people are what really matter in these companies.
Well, one of the pieces of feedback we've gotten is we need more disagreement on this show. So
all right.
This is great. We're going to bring people in like you had to disagree with us. You're welcome back anytime.
if David and I keep agreeing, we'll just bring in third parties that can gang up on us. It's perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Second to last segment. This is my favorite. We talk about, because this is about technology acquisitions as a whole, this show, we talk about, is there an underlying kind of generalizable and broader theme in technology that this acquisition embodies or represents? For me, and this is why I thought Destiny was a great seg, for me, the Bungie acquisition represents the power of whenever there's a platform shift in technology, and that happens very discreetly in the gaming industry where, first there was early PC gaming and early consoles, and then consoles really became dominant with the age of Xbox and PlayStation 2, and Halo and Bungie rode that success, and then in recent times, there's been the age of free to play, the simultaneous age of free to play and mobile, and it's interesting to see. Halo is still a huge part of the cultural landscape, at least in the media landscape in the U.S., but the gaming industry, has moved on in a lot of ways, and what's big now are companies enabled by this next wave, and that's where Bungie's gone with Destiny. So for me, this power of whenever there's a platform shift in gaming or other parts of technology, the ability to not totally wipe away the companies and the winners from before, but create new winners and bigger winners. I think Halo and Bungie represent that really well.
Yeah, I see it maybe a little differently, but kind of I'll pick the same milestones as you. For me, it was the time when, the Bungie acquisition happened at a time when the publishers were getting bigger and there was consolidation among the publishers. So it was getting there was this economy of scale of being big at that time. And that Activision's and Electronic Arts and Take-Two's and Microsoft's had an advantage. And the little kind of mom and pop developer publisher was going away. Bungie's an example. Another acquisition we did was a company called Access Software that did our golf and tennis and other games. So there's, these things start small and then they get somewhat bigger. And then at some point, economy of scale really matters. And then, you start to see a lot of acquisitions. And so that was what was happening kind of in the, around 2000 when this Bungie acquisition happened. It's also what's happening now in free to play. So to follow on your example, I was on the board of Z2. Z2 was, really early free to play company, had a bunch of hits, Trade Nations and, Battle Nations, at some point, scale started to really matter in free to play. If you're going to compete with, Clash of Clans or Candy Crush or something, with just these massive audiences, and you really want to drive traffic to your game, it really matters that if you have this big audience out there. And so it was getting harder and harder for Z2 to compete. And, just like Microsoft bought Bungie, it made a lot of sense for King to buy Z2. So I think, there's kind of cycles to this stuff, and we see it, over and over again. It's, maybe it's not just one platform shift. Maybe it's, just a natural evolution of each market, right? As some new market comes, you have a lot of little guys at the beginning, a lot of experimenters, and then change over time.
And with that, I'll kind of take us into our last section where we render a conclusion. Grades A through F, you get pluses and minuses. And I'll kick it off by asking you a question, Ed. Do you think that the Xbox would be the success that it is today if the Bungie team and your team didn't pull off this acquisition?
I really don't. I think Halo is hugely important to the success of Xbox. I don't know if there would have been an Xbox 360 if there was no Halo with Xbox. So I think it was incredibly important.
Famously, Microsoft criticized for years and years and years of not making money on Xbox and it not being something the company was serious about. And then, where we see where it's gone today and kind of being part of the same platform as Windows and doing so much more than gaming, and the company really taking the whole thing seriously and combined with the HoloLens and a lot of other future bets they're making.
Minecraft, future episode.
Yep. Really paving the way for the future of the company. So it's pretty amazing to hear how important it was to the creation of the platform.
When I went to work on games in the mid-90s, I was leaving a successful career in Office. I'd been there in 10 years. And I was told a couple things. I was told that I was committing career suicide. And I was told, why would you leave Office, one of the most important parts of the company, to go work on something no one cares about? And that was that was a great motivator for me to go make games. Be an important part of Microsoft. And so
I think you could argue a lot more people care about, maybe not a lot, at least as many people who care about Office care about games today.
Yeah, I think it's an important part of the company. I'm proud of that.
It's funny. This is like the part of the show where I always bring in Christensen, but like, boy, does that sound like low end disruption. Even in your career, right? You're leaving to go and play with the thing that nobody can take seriously, and it's a total toy. And how could it ever get big? And this is the thing that matters, and it's the Titan that's been trucking along forever. It's just so reminiscent of every startup that comes out of nowhere, and then suddenly nobody can understand how everyone's taking it seriously, and it's such a gigantic market.
Well, as you know, I'll just say it's fun to be part of that.
Yeah. All right. Well, A+. I showed my card. Talking off the ledge, David.
This is we'll let Ed go last here. I've been struggling with this one, and not just for creating disagreement for the sake of the show, but this acquisition, really any perspective you look at it, and that one that Ben, you and Ed were just talking about is such a powerful one. Look at it financially. I mean, over the lifetime of the Halo franchise, and there's no way anybody could have foreseen this at the time, but it's made over $5 billion in revenue just from game sales alone. That's before merchandise. That's before movies. That's before machinima, which was a whole nother category that Halo really helped launch. Although Microsoft didn't monetize by it. So, really any dimension you look at it, it's an incredible acquisition. The thing that I struggle with a little bit, I come back to the spinoff and I think about what both Halo and Xbox and Bungie, what all three of them could have been if that creative team had really continued being a central part of Xbox and gaming going forward. And for many years, while mobile was rising and while free to play was rising, Halo wasn't part of it. I don't know. I think about what it could have been. So obviously it's really great acquisition. I think I removed the plus because of that. So it's an A for me.
So wait, your argument is that
I argue that there's some unrealized potential here. Nothing against you, Ed, but
yeah. Do you think it's
because it's spun out? You're saying because they lost it again
Yeah, in 2007, which ended up being was the very top of the console market, or at least close to it before the next wave was coming, and right then, Microsoft lost Bungie.
So, are you blaming the Microsoft missing mobile on them not?
Windows Phone is a direct result of the Bungie spin-out, Ben.
Well, even mobile gaming, right? Like Microsoft never had they have this incredible presence in console gaming, and like when I'm sitting there screwing around on my phone playing Clash of Clans or whatever, like it's not a Microsoft property. Yep. Do you think that there's like unrealized potential if that team had stuck there that they?
I don't know. Maybe not, and maybe even Destiny never would have happened within Microsoft. So I don't know. But I look at Halo today and I think, and maybe it's just the natural course of things, but it's not as culturally relevant as it once was, and not as relevant to video gaming as a whole as it once was. And,
okay. Well, a few things. Microsoft had a right of first refusal on Destiny, so they could have poached it if they wanted to. So, whether they made the right choice on that or not, I guess time will tell. But that's just one thing to think about. I was probably involved in a dozen or so acquisitions, big and small, at Microsoft, and definitely the one that went the best was acquiring Bungie. So I'm not going to give myself an A+, but I'll give myself.
Yeah, you're grading yourself here. So.
I'll go with A because this was the number one that I was involved with.
Oh, sounds good to me. And it's kind of funny. Like we throw these arbitrary grades around, but it's sort of just a framework for us to get to dig in a little bit and think about what could have been or what was unrealized.
Sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Ed. We really appreciate all the time. Super special treat both for us and our listeners. And like I said, you're welcome back anytime to disagree with us.
Thanks a lot. It was really fun to be part of this.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And for listeners, we are Acquired FM on Twitter. Yeah, sorry this one went so long, but I just got real into it.
So many great moments. Thanks again, Ed.
Take it easy, guys.
Who got the truth? Is it you, is it you, is it you who got the truth now?
All right, listeners, we have a longtime favorite acquired company to tell you about, Modern Treasury. Modern Treasury is the software platform that turns money movement operations into code.
Yeah, for years now, services like Stripe, Adyen, and Square have enabled developers to accept credit card payments in apps. But that's only the tip of the iceberg of what a business needs to fully handle the movement of money in and out of their company. Those payment actions from Stripe and Adyen, et cetera, flowed through to ledger systems and then reconciliations, compliance verifications, and that's before any cash actually moves between institutions, which of course involves banking operations.
Yes, their APIs, of course, work with Plaid, Stripe, Intuit, etc., but also with their incredible banking partner network with over 30 banks, meaning that for the first time, you literally can turn your banking operations at any of those institutions into software. This means faster payments, easy adoptions of new payment rails when they come out, like FedNow. It means automatic reconciliation and real-time financial data. This lets you move money at the speed of software, which, as we now know after the first half of 2023, being able to move money fast is very important.
Yes, we love Modern Treasury so much. The founders and really the whole team have become close friends of Ben and mine, really back to when they first got started. And this is a very cool full circle moment that just happened. We just emceed their first big conference here in San Francisco, Transfer, which happened at the beginning of June.
Yes, if your business involves money movement, be it a marketplace, fintech platform, real estate, lending, investing, or anyone who reconciles or moves money, go on over to moderntreasury.com/acquired and make sure that when you get in touch, you tell them that Ben and David sent you. All right, listeners, our sponsor is one of our favorite companies, Vanta, and we have something very new from them to share. Of course, you know Vanta enables companies to generate more revenue by getting their compliance certifications. That's SOC 2, ISO 27001. But the thing that we want to share now is Vanta has grown to become the best security compliance platform as you hit hypergrowth and scale into a larger enterprise.
It's kind of wild. When we first started working with Vanta and met Christina, my gosh, they had like a couple hundred customers, maybe. Now they've got 5,000, some of the largest companies out there. It's awesome.
Yeah, and they offer a tremendous amount of customization now for more complex security needs. So if you're a larger company and in the past you showed Vanta to your compliance department, you might have heard something like, oh, well, we've already got a compliance process in place and we can't integrate this new thing. But now, even if you already have a SOC 2, Vanta makes maintaining your compliance even more efficient and robust.
They launched Vendor Risk Management. This allows your company to quickly understand the security posture of the vendors that you're choosing in a standardized way that cuts down on security review times. This is great. And then on the customization front, they now also enable custom frameworks built around your controls and policies. Of course, that's in addition to the fact that with Vanta, you don't just become compliant once, you stay compliant with real-time data pulled from all of your systems, now all of your partner systems, and you get a trust report page to prove it to your customers. If you click the link in the show notes here or go to vanta.com/acquired, you can get a free trial. And if you decide you love it, you will also get $1,000 off when you become a paying customer. Make sure you go to vanta.com/acquired. Hey Siri, were you a good acquisition by Apple?
Interesting question.
Who got the truth? Is it you, is it you, is it you who got the truth now? Is it you, is it you, is it you? Sit me down, say it straight. Another story on the way. Who got the truth?
Welcome to episode 5 of Acquired. This episode is about Siri and Apple's acquisition.
Are we starting?
Yeah.
All right. We're starting.
So welcome back to all of our listeners. As usual, you can give us any feedback or anything at Acquired FM on Twitter. It's been a fun last few episodes. I think this is our last one before the new year.
Yeah, happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah.
In the meantime, though, we've got a special one for you here. We're doing Hey Siri.
We are. David, do you want to start us off with the acquisition history and facts?
As always. So Siri, super interesting history, a spin out from SRI International. which itself is a fascinating organization. Many people are probably familiar with, based in Menlo Park. It itself was actually started in 1946 by the trustees of Stanford, and was originally called the Stanford Research Institute. And the purpose of it was to to research and then potentially spin out and commercialize basic technology, and has been funded by the government, Stanford itself, and many other sources over the years. Done a lot of great work, and in the sort of mid 2000s started working on this project called Kalo, which was funded by DARPA and that SRI was a major participant of. And the goal of that was to develop an artificial intelligence based personal assistant for the government and the military. And SRI thought that the potential was there to spin this out and commercialize it and put it on smartphones. So in 2008, they spun out what would become Siri. And there's a really cool story about how they decided to name it, actually on Quora. Adam Cheyer, one of the co-founders and the VP of engineering at Siri, talks about how they came up with the name. And obviously it echoes SRI, that the company spun out of. But Dag Kittless, who was the CEO of Siri, had apparently once considered it as the name for his daughter when his daughter was born. And
just think of that every time you say "Hey Siri."
Every time you say "Hey Siri," and in Norse, Dag is Norwegian American. In Norse, it means beautiful woman who leads you to victory. And then apparently in Swahili, it means secret, which this is my favorite part, is as Adam writes on Quora, a tip of the hat to their pre-named days of the project when they began as stealth-company.com, which still exists. If you go to stealth-company.com, there's this really old school looking website, saying, "Stealth, get in early. We are forming Silicon Valley's next great company. We aim to fundamentally redesign the face of consumer internet." And then in news and events, they have office location finalized on February 1st and January 18th. Money raised from top VCs, in parentheses, lots.
That's the key to success. That's my understanding. Those are the biggies.
Hey, you got an office, you got funding, you're going to revolutionize consumer internet.
All right, so fast forward. So it's spun out. It's its own independent company. It becomes a consumer offering. There's an app you can download in the store where if you look at some screenshots of it, I was just Googling around earlier today. I remember having it on my phone, but I don't remember how bad that UI used to be.
Oh, it was so bad.
But it was early days, so it's hard to know at this point looking back if like that was sort of table stakes or if they were actually just like, yeah, way form before function. Or
Yep.
I'm sorry, function before form.
I mean, this was back in the days of iOS 3, I believe, and the iPhone 3G and the iPhone 3GS. Super old school. And what was interesting, I remember using Siri 2 before Apple acquired it. And my favorite feature actually was the ability to type into it. You didn't have to use your voice. And I'm so bummed that Apple ditched that over the years.
Yeah, and well, yeah, I mean it manifests in so many other parts of the OS, but the main thing that they basically did was they took out a massive license with Nuance and used Nuance for all the speech recognition.
Nuance itself being an SRI spin out from the past.
I did not know that, but still an independent company that over the years has licensed their speech recognition technology to all the major players, and they kind of combined that with partnering with a bunch of the independent functions that Siri was going to serve. So looking up restaurants,
Open
mapping
table,
things,
making reservations,
weather, kind of all the APIs that you would
times.
expect. Yeah. And they kind of went from there. So it became an app where it was theoretically easier to use your voice to look up all those specific functions. And quite honestly, probably a lot of if-then statements, a lot of regular expressions, like kind of just parsing whatever you were saying.
Baling
and
wire
directing
and duct tape behind the scenes. What's interesting though is like I remember this being super cool as an app, getting a lot of press, downloading it, using it occasionally, but it was actually way harder to do anything on it versus just opening up the OpenTable app yourself.
Yeah, and thinking about that too. I mean, that was before there was proper dictation on the iPhone. So I remember, walking around and opening the Nuance app, the Dragon Dictation app, to talk into my phone, and then copying and pasting out of that into other things where I wanted to use it. So at the time, now we're looking back at like, well, I don't really use Siri that much. I use dictation a lot more than I use Siri, and that all kind of has been bundled together in Apple as sort of one big thing.
Yep. So the company spins out. They raised 2 rounds of venture capital from Morgenthaler and Menlo Ventures, $24 million in total. The app's in the App Store for just about a year, maybe less, I believe. And then in April 2010, and it was only on iOS, they'd announced that they were working on Android versions and BlackBerry versions at the time. Remember BlackBerry, Ben? It's been a long time.
Seems so far away.
And then in April of 2010, Apple announces that they're acquiring the company they've never disclosed the price, but rumors are around $200 million. And then fast forward another year and a half after that to the launch of the iPhone 4S in October 2011. And Siri relaunches as a baked-in feature exclusive to the iPhone 4S.
And as one of the most intense betas of all time. I mean, I think for a year, or maybe was it a full release or 2 full releases, Siri was technically beta. And any ridiculous things that happened with Siri, it's a beta. It's the Gmail thing.
Perpetual beta. And interestingly, in a very Apple-like move, when the iPhone 4S came out, they removed the Siri app from the App Store. So if you wanted to use Siri, you had to have an Apple iPhone 4S.
And you know what? There's a variety of reasons they did that, I'm sure. One of which I bet people get confused. I mean, I bet you hear Siri comes out, you see it advertised, and where do you go to check out the thing that you're seeing everybody talk about on the new Apple phone? You're going to the App Store. And that could be enormously confusing.
Not to mention, I think it helps sell a lot of iPhones that Christmas.
Yeah, and I want to get into that.
So that's the history.
So Apple had acquired Siri for $200 million ish. Heard a variety of figures, but I think we'll kind of lock on that on what we look at the acquisition price this episode. And that was sort of a pet project of Scott Forstall. And if you guys remember, he was sort of the second Steve Jobs of the company, and people talk about Johnny and the design aesthetic and kind of that focus on making beautiful things. But Scott was kind of the product person that was like second only to Steve.
And I remember, I think I'm remembering right, but in the time when Jobs' health was declining, a lot of people were talking about Forstall as potentially being the next CEO of Apple.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, I think a lot of people now know Scott as the guy that kind of took on Apple Maps. Just like Siri was going to be his baby, that Apple Maps was kind of his
not to mention also the guy infamous for skeuomorphic design in iOS.
I think that's a after the fact assignment and really easy way to say that was his little fiefdom. But
history is written by the victors, Ben.
It's true. Scott's actually, I think he produced the Tony Award winning Broadway musical this year. So talk about quite
Hamilton?
A different departure. No, it was last year. This is worth looking up actually, because it was totally crazy when I heard about it. Let's see. So Scott Forstall was a producer of Fun Home, a Broadway musical that follows the story of a lesbian cartoonist looking back on her childhood with a secretly gay father. And so interesting to see after he leaves Apple, total media silence, not doing anything else. Then we find out this is what he's been up to. And the really funny part, I remember, I think it was totally coincidence, but it was during the WWDC keynote that he tweeted that I think it was like his first tweet or his first tweet in a very long time, so excited to have produced the Tony Award-winning musical this year, thanks to all the amazing people that worked on it, or something like that. And I remember thinking, this is unbelievable, like right in the middle of the keynote. But
Wow.
Anyway, so that the acquisition was kind of done by Scott Forstall, and that kicked off a long chain of things happening in Apple acquisitions. Siri, as it sort of turns out, looking back, there's a lot of really intense research that has gone on since then in architecting these kind of voice and I guess, for lack of a better word, AI systems. And, we see a lot of them. I'm not sure if Siri is or not, but I know that Google's is and Cortana is architected as a neural network. And Siri, at the time of acquisition, the company that was Siri was definitely not that. Yeah. And I think it's important to start kind of at this point going forward thinking about Siri as two things. No longer as the product that Apple acquired, but as both an organization at Apple that is responsible for dictation, for voice search, for a variety of those things, and the product that is shipped on iOS devices that we now today know as Siri. And that product is a ton of things all in one. I mean, I think that the impetus for Apple to actually create this group and to focus on shipping this product in every version of iOS going forward, that would not have happened without this acquisition, but the theoretical success that Siri has today as a product is attributed to so much more than that. Apple got extremely serious about hiring great people. They hired a senior director. He's now the senior director of Siri, Alex Acero, who is ex-Microsoft Research. They made a ton of acquisitions, including but not limited to Topsy, Novarius Technologies, AutoCAD, Q, SpotSetter, Vocal IQ pretty recently, and Perceptio. And these things, particularly Topsy, are really kind of the academic rigor around the search and the methodologies that Siri uses today. And I mean, I think Topsy was another $200 million acquisition. That one, ish, yeah. I think actually that one might be reported.
Might be public.
Yeah, but Topsy is effectively the backbone of how the search works within Siri and how the kind of deeply technical part of it works. And I think a lot of really good people came with Topsy. Whereas you look at the actual Siri acquisition, all three of those founders are gone. Yep. They've started, I think Viv, I think is how it's pronounced, but effectively newer, better, next generation
new AI
Siri
company.
Yeah. And they had a lot of people attrit from that acquisition.
Yep.
Topsy, a lot of those people stayed with the company, and from talking to some friends that are kind of in the know, really, really top people. And Dave and I were talking earlier, thought about kind of doing this as a dual episode on Topsy and the Siri company, because that's sort of how important Topsy is to the product that Siri is today.
Yeah, I think a couple really interesting notes. I mean, as Ben mentioned, fascinating that this acquisition has led to the creation of this whole organization within Apple that, AI, search, and that type of platform technology was so not in Apple's DNA prior to the Siri acquisition.
Yeah, I truly believe that we wouldn't have this product shipped if not for, wow, we just unloaded a bunch of cash acquiring this thing. We got to be serious about it.
Yep. And what's doubly interesting about that is that the actual people at Siri that Apple acquired, they're gone. It was acquiring this company and bringing this product and this feature into iOS that was the first foundation of a platform that Apple started building, and all the great people that they've acquired and hired since then. And you can argue, I think, probably very justifiably so, that Google is still ahead of Apple in a lot of these areas: AI, search, voice search, speech recognition. But certainly Apple is not nearly as far behind as they would have been had they continued along the path they were before this acquisition.
No. And I think that in kind of thinking about any acquisition, you can use the framework of build or buy. If you're thinking about it before you make the acquisition, you're a leader at that company and you've decided that, this is something we need to pursue. And it's going to cost us $200 million to buy, or we could build. And I don't think that is the case here. I don't think that Apple
Could they even have built
Yeah,
would they
well,
have been
they
able to
wouldn't have.
hire the really top people that they would have needed
Mm.
to in machine learning, AI, speech recognition to make this happen?
Yeah, I don't. It's interesting. I mean, that would have been a tall order, and still was. I mean, I think that even after they did the Siri acquisition, they had a long road ahead of them to turn it into the product it is today. And the question that sort of begs to me is, you know, it would have a different name, and it would have started off in a different place. But what if they didn't acquire Siri at all, and they just made all these other acquisitions and these other key hires? Because they've hired a lot of the really great people away from Nuance.
Yep.
They've actually architected the whole kind of speech recognition pipeline that they were licensing from Nuance internally. They've rewritten and thrown away all the code that they've acquired from Siri. So there's no Siri people, there's no Siri technology, there's merely a Siri brand and basically what that original product did there. But a lot of the success of what Siri, the product in iOS, is today is not attributed to what they actually acquired.
Yeah. And it's interesting, a little bit of an aside, but on Nuance, most of the major mobile companies, mobile platform companies, Microsoft, Google, Apple, I believe most or all of them have moved away from Nuance at this point.
Yeah, I think that's true. Got to be some really upset account reps at Nuance.
Yeah. So I love the discussion we've been having. In a way, you know, we're sitting here at the end of 2015 talking about this. It's been almost 6 years since this acquisition happened. We haven't really talked about Siri, the product / feature yet. And I think, you know, I would argue, as would a lot of people, it really hasn't lived up to its promise so far.
Nope.
I don't know about you, Ben, but I use Siri for one thing: setting alarms.
It's a God, I would love to see the histogram of this at Apple, because I just don't think Siri has gotten that far. Well, they have two problems. One, I don't think they've gotten that far from actually being able to, you know, do things that are like quote unquote learning, right? Like, I know I have these very specific functions, much like the original Siri, where I go, "Hey Siri, look up the best breakfast restaurant around me," or something like that. And the sort of second problem around that is, if they have fixed that, or they do in the future kind of roll out something that's much more technically sophisticated, that's truly like a deep systems approach to search and understanding and, you know, all these deeply technical things, how am I supposed to know about it? Because I think that, like, there are some of us that, you know, will watch the WWDC keynote and that's super cool, but it's a really sort of dangerous thing with these voice-based interfaces that don't have a layout of all the possible functions in front of your face that you can use. If it falls on its face a couple times for you, you basically assume it can't do things in the future, and you never try again.
Yep. And you definitely fall into that uncanny valley, and then you just reject it. And that's why I said it's super interesting. We're sitting here at the end of 2015 talking about this, because I think it's non-controversial to say Siri as a product has been a failure. All these, like, even just basic stuff. Like, you know, my wife's name is Jenny, Jennie. That's her given name. Every time I talk to Siri about my wife, it says Jenny. And she has a different last name than me. She didn't change her name. Siri doesn't like figure that out. It's so annoying. Super basic stuff. But we're sitting here right now. You know, Amazon came out with the Echo and Alexa this year. They're investing heavily in that. Definitely Amazon believes that voice and voice interfaces are going to be a huge part of technology going forward, as does Google, as does Apple. In a lot of ways, I think the full story on this acquisition hasn't been written yet, because there's going to be so much more to come.
Yeah, and then there needs to be. I mean, the interesting thing, you know, we say this show is about technology acquisitions that actually went well. And if you look at kind of the app, we can do this episode of this show because Apple needed to do this. I mean, it's effectively table stakes to have a personal assistant baked into your mobile operating system. Like, it would be embarrassing.
It's funny, as you're saying that,
I
I had my left hand twisted back, and I accidentally activated Siri on my Apple Watch.
Oh, do you have Hey Siri on?
No, it was holding the digital crown.
That's your fault.
but it's so fundamentally like this needs to be a part, especially as you move into watches and televisions and connected speakers and being able to say, "Hey Siri" to your phone, a critical part of any platform.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. In trying to think of examples of things that Siri can't do, the thought exercise of it is actually difficult because your mind is trapped in the things that you can do. Like I'm pulling up my phone thinking of like, hey Siri, am I going to have time to go for a run tomorrow before work based on when my first meeting is and the fact that I want to walk to work not knowing what the weather will be right now?
Hi, Ben Leheim.
That's a mispronunciation of L'chaim because it's Hanukkah. Like,
right.
There's a long way to go.
Long way to go.
This is a great time to tell you about one of our very favorite companies, Crusoe.
So Crusoe, as listeners know by now, is a clean compute cloud provider specifically built for AI workloads. NVIDIA is one of their major partners, and literally Crusoe's data centers are nothing but racks and racks of A100s and H100s. And because Crusoe's cloud is purpose-built for AI and run on wasted, stranded, or clean energy, they can provide significantly better performance per dollar than traditional cloud providers.
Yes, we talked about that on our ACQ2 episode with Crusoe CEO Chase Lockmiller.
The other element that makes Crusoe special is the environmental angle. Crusoe, of course, locates their data centers at stranded energy sites. So think oil flares, wind farms that can't use all the energy they generate, etc., and uses that power that would otherwise be wasted to run your AI workloads instead.
Yep. Obviously, it's a huge benefit for the environment and for customers on costs since Crusoe doesn't rely on the energy grid. Energy is the second largest cost of running AI after, of course, the price you pay NVIDIA for the chips. And these lower energy costs get passed on to customers.
It's super cool that they can put their data centers out there in these remote locations where, quote unquote, energy happens, as opposed to the other hyperscalers such as AWS and Google and Azure, who need to build their data centers close to major traffic hubs where the internet happens because they are doing everything in their clouds.
Yep. If you, your company, or your portfolio companies would like to use the lower cost and more performant infrastructure for your AI workloads, go to crusoecloud.com/acquired. That's CRUSOE cloud.com/acquired, or click the link in the show notes.
All right, so let's move into the next segment of the show where we categorize this acquisition. I'm not looking at it right now, but I think we've got
people, technology, product, business line, and other. For me, our audience is craving disagreement here, but I just don't think. Well, Ben, what's your category?
So, I think if you didn't do your research, it's technology. And you think you're acquiring this super academic, and I guess it is partly technology, and we've just come a long way since Siri was started. But what it ultimately became for Apple is a product, because they sure as hell don't have the people, and they don't have the technology that it was originally built on. And the world has moved in a direction, and Apple is, to their credit, really kept up with this and put some serious muscle behind this and hired some of the top people in the field to build out the direction of the technology that's actually moving in. So I'm calling it a product acquisition.
Boom. I'm disagreeing.
All right.
Maybe I didn't do my research. I think it's a technology acquisition. I mean, as we were just saying, Siri as a product sucks.
Yeah, I didn't say they acquired a good one. I mean,
fair point. Yeah, I mean, I think, look, we've already talked about all of this, but I think for me, it's a technology acquisition because I don't view Siri as a product. It sucks, but I don't think it is even really, especially going forward, will be a product or a feature. I think it's just going to be so fundamentally baked into the platform, voice and voice interface, and the predictive assistant parts of it. That I think that is just going to be a fundamental technology piece, and will be more so over time. And yes, that's not exactly what they acquired, but that was the kernel of it that they've built over time.
Yeah. I mean, I have no doubt that voice will be more central to the way that human beings compute in the future and interact with machines. I don't think screens are going to go away. I think we'll become much less reliant on them and much more conversational with machines. But the question is Apple doing this and building what they're doing today actually moving in the right direction so they're going to be the ones to create that future? Or is it going to be someone that fundamentally kind of takes a new approach to what is a computer? How do you interact with it? Can you do it all over voice and not be hampered with a legacy of let's try and tie this future of computing into the way that people interact with this screen?
Yep, that's a great point.
I guess that's me cheating and preemptively launching into technology trends.
Love it.
The next part of our show is what trends does this illustrate for you in technology right now? That's absolutely one. I mean, every time I have someone talk to me about a thing that they're working on that's more about a natural interface or screenless computing or thinking about the movie Her, I've had probably 3 conversations in the last few months with different entrepreneurs working on this, people at Microsoft, at Apple.
There are so many AI companies right now doing everything from just like, we are an AI research company platform that is building to be acquired by Facebook or Google or Apple. I think I love that theme and is so true in technology. Like, you can't bring old world thinking into the future. It's like the Henry Ford analogy of a faster horse.
Yeah. And, we'll eat these words if in 10 years Apple's the leader in this category and everyone's interacting with their voice device. But I don't know. It's hard for me to see Siri today evolving into what I think is clearly the future of computing.
Yeah, but I also I don't think screens are going away. I think visual interaction with computers is not going to stop and is only going to continue to rise with computing. But you don't always want to do that. Sometimes you want a voice-based interaction, like in the kitchen, which is the primary use case for the Echo.
It reminds me of a similar trend. So thinking about the fact that you've got this massive spike in tablet sales since they came out. For so many people, the tablet is not as successful as the phone, but for so many people, the tablet is the computer that they actually needed. And ever since personal computers came out, people have been buying them. People have been using them for a variety of purposes. But it was really the device that we could build at the time that was over-applied to a variety of use cases that were outside of the specific thing that they were actually good at. Mm-hmm. And perfect story. At my grandma's house over Thanksgiving, helping her move some stuff around. She needs to unplug her computer because they're going to be putting new carpet in that room and they're moving into the other room. And I'm like, oh, well, I'll plug it back in and we'll set it up in this other room for now. And she goes, you don't need to. I haven't been on it in a month. And I was like, what? Because she really does a lot on her computer. It's not like she's
on her iPad.
Well, she's very proficient with her computer. She's been fully reliant on her iPad and her iPhone. And I didn't realize this. I mean, I've been emailing with her, and I actually don't think she does her spreadsheets on the iPad. But I think,
but she could.
She could. She totally could. And it's just me kind of explaining the new input mechanism to her. But for so many people, the point I'm getting at is that the computer was doing a lot of jobs, and it had a very specific job. And then when the tablet came out, it revealed that the tablet is actually a better thing to do a lot of those jobs around consumption, around lightweight email, things like that, than the computer was. So then people are actually using tablets, a better thing for that purpose, for its intended purpose. I think screens right now are oversaturated the same way that PCs were oversaturated. We've got screens doing a lot of jobs screens don't need to be doing. And sure, screens will be doing things where there's a heavy display of information. Driving. Yeah, great point. Heavy display of information, things where you need to reference multiple things in parallel and not just have a single track. Things where you have modal interfaces where you need to understand context with new context on top. But there sure is a lot that does not need to be on a screen that we use screens for.
Yep. Another theme that I'd throw in that I think this illustrates is that consumer generally, and specifically building great consumer products, is really hard. I mean, I feel like Siri is a classic example that a lot of companies and products have a trap they fall into, which is, I've got this awesome technology. We can do these amazing things. Look at these really cool, shiny demos. And then you get it out in the real world with like edge cases and delivering actual value on a consistent basis, solving people's real problems, doing that without friction. And it's really, really hard to live up to those promises in the demo. And when you think about most consumer products, many or most consumer products that end up being really successful, they're really simple. And it's very clear what their value is. Like Airbnb, which I've been on an Airbnb kick lately. My wife and I just signed up to be hosts in the last 6 months, and it pays half our mortgage. And that's amazing. And that's like, as a host, that's what Airbnb does for me. And we get to meet these really cool people who are coming through. And we're traveling for the holidays to a whole bunch of places to see family. And we're staying in, I believe, 3 different Airbnbs this month.
So what you're getting at is you very much understand the intended purpose of that product.
Absolutely. It's so simple. It's so elegant. And it perfectly solves my problem. Siri, I don't even know what it's supposed to do. It looks cool. I watch the keynotes and I'm like, that's awesome. And then I never use it.
Yeah, I mean, to take it to another, I'm sitting there so I have the new Apple TV, and I was looking for some videos on YouTube, laying there on the couch the other night, and it is the worst to type into. Just like one row of characters, swiping around, trying to tap individual it's like being on PS2 again, and I was using the keyboard. Anyway, so I'm like, oh, wait, Siri, this is supposed to be like a really conversational UI. I'll use Siri. And I'm like, hey, Siri, look for the Aziz Ansari stand-up on YouTube. Or at first I said the Aziz Ansari stand-up, and it brought up like movies with Aziz Ansari, and they were like, theatrical releases. And I was like, oh, I should probably specify. And I'm like, look up the Aziz Ansari stand-up on YouTube. Exact same search results. And I was like, oh my God, it's not even plugged into YouTube. And like every time I have this brilliant idea where I'm like, I should use Siri for that, it doesn't really work.
Yep.
So, and I think we're weirdos. Like, we're tech people. I am the kind of person that walks down the street and it's raining, so I'm not typing on my phone. And what do? I like hold down Siri and I'm like, Siri, text back, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, because you're not worried about the social stigma of like talking to nobody walking down the street.
Total weirdo. And I'm fine with that, but I fully recognize that like other people aren't doing that. And I have to imagine, if you could see the numbers at Apple of the people that are actually like using Siri on an hourly or daily basis, it's probably very disappointing.
I'm curious, as you're listening to this, if you disagree with us, you should totally let us know that you use Siri and what you use it for.
Yeah, God, I'd like to know.
I would love to know.
At Gilbert, at DJ Rosenty, at Acquired FM, find us. Yeah.
The other thing I want to add on that before we move on, this is also, building consumer companies, consumer products is super hard. This is one of the reasons why as VCs, we really focus when we're looking at consumer companies on cohort and retention data, because just like straight up acquisition data, user acquisition data isn't enough. Like the question is, are people coming back, month after month after month, day after day after day? Are they continuing to see value from your product? And it's really hard.
Yeah, I wonder. So in February 2015, one of the founders of Siri was remarking in an interview to TechCrunch that more than 200 million people use it monthly and more than 100 million people use it every day. So it's 1 in 5 people with access to Siri actually are a daily active user, which is a little shocking. Like, I wonder how wide the purview of that is. And I also wonder, I mean, every single person out there is going to laugh, but like, you're sitting in a meeting, you hold the button, it goes into Siri mode, you're super embarrassed. I can't tell you how many times a day I accidentally open Siri. I mean, I'm just glad they turned off the little doo-doo so that I don't look like a total idiot in meetings.
That must have been the number one use case for Siri was the accidental, embarrassing meeting doo-doo.
Yep.
All right. Should we wrap this one up, Ben?
Yeah, so I think it's time to give it a grade. I think that if they didn't do this, Apple might not have moved in this direction and might have tried to follow after Google and Microsoft did it. I don't think it's really in their DNA to start this without going on an acquisition spree, to start acquiring a lot of talent, hiring people from other companies. These days, it's sort of table stakes to have it, but Apple definitely does not sell one single more iPhone because it has Siri versus it doesn't.
I bet they sold a lot more iPhone 4S's because it had Siri.
Sure, once.
Yeah, once.
I don't think anything they're doing to Siri now sells a single additional iPhone.
Agree.
Or like when they, add Siri to another market. I think that there's an interesting thing, like maybe we'll see in China, maybe we'll see it pick up a little bit since in China it's so much more difficult to type and it's so much easier to
enter characters.
Yeah, it's got to be much nicer over there. And if actually you have any experience as a Chinese person or someone who has used the iPhone in China, would love to get your feedback on that too.
Yeah.
But I think to this point, it's hard to point to ROI other than it was something they sort of needed to do long term. And I don't know that actually acquiring the company Siri was the best way to do it. I'm going to give this one a C.
Yep. So I think this acquisition was just like so classically Apple, or at least Apple of the last few years. Spend south of $500 million to acquire a technology company that you then use to build into part of your platform and your whole product platform. I'm thinking about, Authentech and the fingerprint.
Great acquisition.
Great acquisition. We should do that in a future episode.
Hey.
The company, I'm blanking on the name that they bought that was the semiconductor company.
PA Semi.
Yeah, PA Semi.
And God, has that paid dividends.
Oh, man.
Are they the highest yield? I think they're the highest yield producing ARM chip manufacturer in the world now. And
not to mention, like, now Apple designs their own chips.
Yeah, and the fact that they can do their own system on a chip, and the fact that they tie it directly into their operating system, they're able to do things like Touch ID, where they have that secure enclave that sits separately than the processor. And we'll do PA Semi too at some point. But.
So much good stuff. And when you stack rank those, like, unfortunately, Siri falls pretty far down the list. So, I think I'd give it I'm going to give it a B because I think it is. I'm giving it a B because future importance of voice and AI is going to be huge for Apple. And if they hadn't done this, if they hadn't started when they did, there's just like Google and Facebook and maybe even Microsoft would be so far beyond them at this point, they could never catch up, no matter how much they would spend.
Sounds
or
like
who
Maps.
they would buy. Yeah. Although I just saw a stat the other day that like Maps is getting better and getting more usage.
Well, yeah, it's getting more usage. It ships with the OS.
Well, right. I haven't tried it in a while.
I didn't have a bad experience. I keep hearing it's getting better though. So,
but we still don't use it. So, same with Siri. All right, B for me.
B for you, C for me. I think that's all we got.
That's all we got. Happy holidays, everybody. We will see you in 2016.
Siri, do you have anything to say to the listeners?
I'm sorry, Ben. I'm afraid I can't answer that.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Who got the truth now?
All right, listeners, we have a longtime favorite acquired company to tell you about, Modern Treasury. Modern Treasury is the software platform that turns money movement operations into code.
Yeah, for years now, services like Stripe, Adyen, and Square have enabled developers to accept credit card payments in apps. But that's only the tip of the iceberg of what a business needs to fully handle the movement of money in and out of their company. Those payment actions from Stripe and Adyen, et cetera, flowed through to ledger systems and then reconciliations, compliance verifications, and that's before any cash actually moves between institutions, which of course involves banking operations.
Yes, their APIs, of course, work with Plaid, Stripe, Intuit, etc., but also with their incredible banking partner network with over 30 banks, meaning that for the first time, you literally can turn your banking operations at any of those institutions into software. This means faster payments, easy adoptions of new payment rails when they come out, like FedNow. It means automatic reconciliation and real-time financial data. This lets you move money at the speed of software, which, as we now know after the first half of 2023, being able to move money fast is very important.
Yes, we love Modern Treasury so much. The founders and really the whole team have become close friends of Ben and mine, really back to when they first got started. And this is a very cool full circle moment that just happened. We just emceed their first big conference here in San Francisco, Transfer, which happened at the beginning of June.
Yes, if your business involves money movement, be it a marketplace, fintech platform, real estate, lending, investing, or anyone who reconciles or moves money, go on over to moderntreasury.com/acquired and make sure that when you get in touch, you tell them that Ben and David sent you.